Hello, welcome back to Mr. Small's South Carolina real estate glossary training. All right, we are on part two of South Carolina real estate glossary, and we're gonna go ahead and start with the L's. We are in the L's. First word is we're gonna begin with let's see. Let's see. One who contracts to rent, occupy, and use property under a lease agreement. A tenant. Lessor. An owner who enters into a lease agreement with a tenant, a landlord. Letter of intent, LOI. Generally, an agreement to agree. It outlines the terms between parties who have not formalized an agreement into a contract. LOIs are generally not binding and unenforceable. Lien, a form of encumbrance which usually makes specific property security for the payment of a debt or discharge of an obligation. Life estate, an estate or interest in real property which is held for the duration of the life of some certain person. It may be limited by the life of the person holding it or by the life of some other person. Life tenant, the owner of a life estate. Limited liability company, LLC, a business structure that combines the pass-through taxation of a partnership or sole proprietorship with the limited liability of a corporation. Liquidated damages, a sum agreed upon by the parties to be full damages if a certain event occurs. Listing, an employment contract between principal and agent authorizing the agent to perform services for the principal involving the latter's property. Listing contracts are entered into for the purpose of securing persons to buy, lease, or rent property. Employment of an agent by a prospective purchaser or lessee to locate property for purchase or lease may be considered a listing. Littoral rights. The right of a property owner whose land borders on a body of water, such as a lake, ocean, or sea, to reasonable use and enjoyment of the shore and water the property borders on. Living trust. An agreement where the trustee holds the legal possession of an asset, real estate, that belongs to another person, the beneficiary, and it is created while the person is alive. Loan to value ratio, LTV, the percentage of a property's value that a lender can or may loan to a borrower. Lot and blocks, a legal description of land used for plotted properties, stating the number, lot, and block in a particular subdivision. Lot area, the area in square feet of a zoning lot. Lot coverage, that portion of a zoning lot which, when viewed from above, is covered by a building. Loyalty, an agent's duty to place the client's interests above those of all others, including the agent's own self-interest. Market allocation, an agreement between members of a trade to refrain from competition in specific market areas. Market value, the highest price in terms of money which a property will bring in a competitive and open market, and under all conditions required for a fair sale. The buyer and seller acting prudently, knowledgeably, and neither affected by undue pressures. Marketable title, title which a reasonable purchaser, informed as to the facts and their legal importance and acting with reasonable care, would be willing and ought to accept. Master plan, a long-term planning document. It establishes the framework and key elements of a site reflecting a clear vision created and adopted in an open process. It synthesizes civic goals and the public's aspirations for a project, gives them form and organization, and defines a realistic plan for implementation, including subsequent approvals by public agencies. Mechanics lien, a lien created by statute which exists against real property in favor of persons who have performed work or furnished materials for the improvement of the real property. Metes and bounds, a term used in describing the boundary lines of land, setting forth all the boundary lines together with their terminal points and angles. Metes, length or measurements, and bounds, boundaries. Description is often used when a great deal of accuracy is required. Mineral rights, a landowner's right to receive a portion of the profits of any minerals that are extracted from the land. Mobile home, a structure transportable in one or more sections, designed and equipped to contain not more than 2 dwelling units to be used with or without a foundation system. Modular, a system for the construction of dwellings and other improvements to real property through the on-site assembly of component parts, modules, that have been mass-produced away from the building site. Mortgage, an instrument recognized by law by which property is hypothecated to secure the payment of a debt or obligation. Mortgage banker, a person whose principal business is the originating, financing, closing, selling, and servicing of loans secured by real property for institutional lenders on a contractual basis. Mortgage broker, a broker who arranges a mortgage loan between a lender and a borrower for a fee. Mortgage insurance premium, MIP, the amount paid by a mortgager for mortgage insurance on an FHA insured loan. Mortgagee, one to whom a mortgager gives a mortgage to secure a loan or performance of an obligation, a lender or creditor. Mortgagor, one who gives a mortgage on his or her property to secure a loan or assure performance of an obligation, a borrower. Multiple listing service, an association of real estate agents providing for a pool of listings and the sharing of commissions on a specified basis. Net lease, a lease requiring a leasee to pay charges against the property such as taxes, insurance, and maintenance costs in addition to rental payments. Net listing, a listing which provides that the agent may retain as compensation for agent services all sums received over and above a net price to the owner. Novation, the substitution or exchange of a new obligation or contract for an old one by the mutual agreement of the parties. Obedience, this fiduciary relationship obligates the agent to act in good faith at all times, obeying the client's instructions in accordance with the contract. Offer and acceptance, elements required for the formation of a legally binding contract. The expression of an offer to contract on certain terms by one person to another person. All right, that's from the offerer to the offeree. And an indication by the offeree of his acceptance of those terms. Open listing, an authorization given by a property owner to a real estate agent wherein said agent is given the non-exclusive right to secure a purchaser. Open listings may be given to any number of agents without liability to compensate any except the one who first secures a buyer ready, willing, and able to meet the terms of the listing or secures the acceptance by the seller of a satisfactory offer. Opinion of title, an attorney's written evaluation of the condition of the title to a parcel of land after examination of the abstract of title. Ostensible agency, a person who has been given the appearance of being an employee or acting an agent for another principal, which would make anyone dealing with the ostensible agent reasonably believe he or she was an employee or agent. Package mortgage, A method of financing in which the loan that finances the purchase of a home also finances the purchase of personal items such as a washer and dryer, refrigerator, a stove, and other specified appliances. Partition, a division of real or personal property or the proceeds therefrom among co-owners. Partnership, an arrangement in which two or more individuals share the profits and liabilities of a business venture. Percentage lease, lease on the property, the rental for which is determined by the amount of business done by the lessee, usually a percentage of gross receipts from the business with provisions for a minimum rent. Percolation rate, the rate usually expressed as inches per hour or inches per day at which water moves through soil. Periodic estate, an interest in land where there is no definite termination date, but the rental period is fixed at a certain sum per week, month, or year, also called an estate from period to period. Personal property, any property which is not real property. Pitch, also known as the slope, typically used in describing the slope of a roof, driveway, sidewalk, etc. Plasterboard / wallboard, gypsum board panels that are typically used in interior wall construction. Wallboard usually has a painted finish and are supported by wood or metal studs behind. Platform construction, wood frame construction commonly found in residential construction in which floors are supported by joists, beams, and bearing walls. Police power, the right of the state to enact laws and enforce them for the order, safety, health, morals, and general welfare of the public. Post and beam construction, a type of construction in which the beams and joists are larger, allowing the floor to span longer than the typical 16 inches or 24 inches found in residential construction. Okay? Pre-approval, a step above pre-qualification, an evaluation of a potential borrower by a lender that determines whether the borrower qualifies for a loan from the lender or the maximum amount that the lender would be willing to lend. Pre-qualification, a process whereby a loan officer takes information from a borrower and makes a tentative assessment of how much the lending institution is willing to lend them. Prepayment penalty, the charge payable to a lender by a borrower under the terms of the loan agreement if the borrower pays off the outstanding principal balance of the loan prior to its maturity. Price, the amount a purchaser agrees to pay and a seller agrees to accept in an arm's length transaction. Price fixing, conspiring to establish fixed fees or prices for services or products. Primary mortgage market, the marketplace whereby loans are originated. Principal, the employer of an agent, such as a buyer or seller. Principle of anticipation, affirms that value is created by anticipated benefits to be derived in the future. Principle of change holds that it is the future, not the past, which is of prime importance in estimating value. Change is largely the result of cause and effect. Principle of conformity holds that the maximum of value is realized when a reasonable degree of homogeneity of improvements is present. Use conformity is desirable, creating and maintaining higher values. Principle of contribution. A component part of a property is valued in proportion to its contribution to the value of the whole. Holds that maximum value are achieved when the improvements on a site produce the highest net return commensurate with the investment. Principle of progression. The worth of a leaser the worth of a lesser valued the worth of a lesser valued residence tends to be enhanced by association with higher valued residences in the same area. Principle of substitution affirms that the maximum value of a property tends to be set by the cost of acquiring an equally desirable and valuable substitute property, assuming no costly delay is encountered in making the substitution. Priority of lien. The order in which liens are given legal precedence or preference. Private mortgage insurance, PMI. Mortgage guarantee insurance available to conventional lenders on the first high-risk portion of a loan. Probate, the official proving of a will, the legal process wherein the estate of a decedent is administered. Promissory note, following a loan commitment from the lender, the borrower signs a note promising to repay the loan under stipulated terms. The promissory note establishes personal liability for its payment. The evidence of the debt. Property insurance provides protection against most risks to property, such as fire, theft, and some weather damage. Proration, adjustments of interest, taxes, and insurance, etc., on a pro rata basis as of the closing or agreed upon date. Quitclaim deed, a deed to relinquish any interest in property which the grantor may have without any warranty of title or interest. Radon, a colorless, odorless gas that is emitted from soils, rocks, and water as a result of radioactive decay in certain areas of the country. That's radon. Rafter, the structural member or beam that supports the roof. It spans from the exterior wall to the ridge board of the peak of the roof. Real estate, land plus anything permanently attached to the land. Real estate broker, a person or an organization acting as the agent for others in negotiating the purchase and sale of real property for a fee. Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, RESPA, RESPA, a federal law requiring the disclosure to borrowers of settlement, closing, procedures, and costs by means of a pamphlet and forms prescribed by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. Real estate syndicate, an organization of investors usually in the form of a limited partnership who have joined together for the purpose of pooling capital for the acquisition of real property interests. Real property, land, things affixed to land, appurtenances, plus the bundle of rights. Reasonable care, the degree of caution and concern for the safety of himself or herself, and others an ordinarily prudent and rational person would use in the circumstances. This is a subjective test of determining if a person is negligent, meaning he or she did not exercise reasonable care. Reconciliation, the final stage in the appraisal process where the appraiser reviews the data and estimates the subject property's value. Recording, the process of placing a document on file with a designated public official for public notice. This public official is usually a county officer known as the county recorder, who designates the fact that a document has been presented for recording by placing a recording stamp upon it, indicating the time of day and the date when it was officially placed on file. Documents filed with the recorder are considered to be placed on open notice to the general public of that county. Redemption, Buying back one's property after a judicial sale. Re redlining. Redlining. An illegal lending policy of denying real estate loans on properties in older, changing urban areas, usually with large minority populations, because of alleged high lending risk without due consideration being given by the lending institution to the credit worthiness of the individual loan applicant. Remainder, an estate which takes effect after the termination of the prior estate, such as a life estate, a future possessory interest in real estate. Remainder men, a person who inherits or is entitled to inherit property upon the termination of the estate of the former owner. Rescission, the cancellation of a contract and restoration of the parties to the same position they held before the contract was entered into. Reversionary interest, the interest which a person has in lands or other property upon the termination of the preceding estate. A future interest. Rights of survivorship, the right of a surviving tenant or tenants to succeed to the entire interest of the deceased tenant, the distinguishing feature of a joint tenancy. Riparian rights, the right of a landowner whose land borders on a stream or watercourse to use and enjoy the water which is adjacent to or flows over the owner's land, provided such use does not injure other riparian owners. R value, a measurement of the ability of insulation to slow the transfer of heat or cold. The higher the R value, the greater the insulation power. Sales comparison approach, a valuation method which compares a subject property's characteristics with those of comparable properties which have recently sold in similar transactions. Satisfaction of mortgage, release of mortgage, the discharge of a mortgage from the records upon payment of the debt. Scarcity, a lack of supply. Secondary mortgage market. The market where lenders sell their loans to the large secondary marketing agencies, FNMA, FHLMC, and GNMA, or to other investors. Section of land is established by government survey. Contains 640 acres and is 1 mile square. Septic system. A small-scale sewage treatment system common in areas with no connection to main sewage pipes provided by local governments or private corporations. Servient tenement. A parcel of real property that is encumbered by an easement of a dominant estate. Severalty ownership. Severalty ownership. Real property that is owned by only one person. Sole ownership. Sheathing. Panels that cover the exterior wall, typically made of plywood or exterior grade gypsum board. Sheriff's deed. A deed given by court order in connection with the sale of a property to satisfy a judgment. Sherman Antitrust Act. Federal legislation including imposition of civil and punitive damages for antitrust activities. Short sale. A seller's attempt to sell the real estate whereby the liens are greater than the value of the property. Siding. A veneer cover found on the side of residential construction, typically made of wood boards, horizontal, vinyl, or aluminum. Sill plate, sill plate, the bottom member of wood frame stud wall. Single agent, an agent who works only for the buyer or the seller. Slab on grade construction, a structure which does not include a basement. The first floor is made up of a concrete slab which lays on the ground and supported by foundation walls. Soffit, the underside of a roof overhang. Special agent, an agent with limited authority to act on behalf of the principal, such as created by a listing contract. Special warranty deed, a deed in which the grantor warrants or guarantees the title only against defects arising during the grantor's ownership of the property and not against defects existing before the time of the grantor's ownership. Specific lien, a lien that attaches to one specific property only. Specific performance, an action to compel performance of an agreement. Sale of land as an alternative to damages or rescission. Specifications, a document provided by architects that describe the quality of construction. Statute of frauds, a state law based on an Old English statute requiring certain contracts to be in writing and signed before they will be enforceable at law. Contracts, example, contracts for the sale of real property. Contracts that are not performed within 1 year. Statute of limitations, a statute prescribing a period of limitations for the bringing of certain kinds of legal actions. Statutory lien, a charge or claim upon property that arises by virtue of specific statutes that address the relationship between the property owner and the party given the ability to place the lien. Steering, the practice in which real estate brokers guide prospective home buyers towards or away from certain neighborhoods based on their race. Steering is highly illegal. Straight line depreciation, a method of depreciation under which improvements are depreciated at a constant rate throughout the estimated useful life of the improvement. Straight note, a note in which a borrower repays the principal in a lump sum at maturity, while interest is paid in installments or at maturity. Studs, vertical framing members found in wall construction, typically placed 12 inches, 16 inches, or 24 inches on center. Subagent, a person upon whom the powers of an agent have been conferred, not by the principal, but by an agent as authorized by the agent's principal. Subdivision regulations, the control of the division of a tract of land into individual lots by requiring development according to specific standards and procedures adopted by local ordinances. Sublease, a lease given by a leasee. A subordinate, the make subject to or junior or inferior to. Subordination agreement, an agreement by the holder of an encumbrance against real property to permit that claim to take an inferior position to other encumbrances against the property. Supply, the amount of a certain good or service that is available in the market. Survey, the process by which a parcel of land is measured and its area is ascertained. Also, the blueprint showing the measurements, boundaries, and area. Tax, enforced charge extracted of personal, corporations, and organizations by the government to be used to support government services and programs. Tax deferred exchange. The trade or exchange of one real property for another without the need to pay income taxes on the gain at the time of trade. Tax lien. A lien imposed by law upon a property to secure the payment of taxes. Tenancy by the entireties. Under certain state laws, ownership of property acquired by a husband and wife during marriage, which property is jointly and equally owned, upon death of one spouse, it becomes the property of the survivor. Tenancy in common. Co-ownership of property by two or more persons who each hold an undivided interest without right of ownership, without right of survivorship. Interests need not be equal. Testamentary trust. A trust which arises upon the death of the testator and which is specified in his or her will. Testate. Having made a valid will before one dies. Testator. One who makes a will. Testers. Volunteers from state or private agencies who enforce fair housing or claiming to be home seekers, thereby finding out if brokers deal fairly with all clients or customers. Tie-in arrangement. A contract where a transaction depends upon another. Time is of the essence. A condition of a contract expressing the essential nature of performance of the contract by a party in a specified period of time. Timeshare. A form of subdivision of real property into rights to the recurrent exclusive use or occupancy of a lot, parcel, unit, or segment of real property on an annual or some other periodic basis for a specified period of time. Title insurance. Insurance to protect a real property owner or lender up to a specified amount against certain types of losses, example, defective or unmarketable title. Townships. In the survey of public lands of the United States, a territorial subdivision 6 miles long, 6 miles wide, and containing 36 sections, each 1 square mile, located between 2 range lines and 2 township lines. Trade fixture. Articles of personal property annexed by a business tenant to real property which are necessary to the carrying on of a trade and are removable by the tenant. Transferability. The ability to transfer ownership of property from one person to another. Trust. Trust, a legal relationship under which title to property is transferred to a person known as a trustee. Trustee, the third party under a deed of trust, a person who holds title to property for the benefit of another, called a beneficiary. Trustor, one who borrows money from a deed trust, one who borrows money from a trust deed lender, then deeds the real property securing the loan to a trustee to be held as security until the trustor has performed the obligation to the lender under terms of a deed of trust. A person who conveys title to a trustee. Truth in Lending Act, TILA. The name given to the federal statutes and regulations, Regulation Z, which are designed primarily to ensure that prospective borrowers and purchasers of credit receive credit cost information before entering into a transaction. Underground storage tank. A tank and any underground piping connected to the tank that has at least 10% of its combined volume underground. Underwriter. An individual at a lending institution who determines creditworthiness in order to qualify an applicant for a loan. Underwriting, the criteria with which a lender determines the creditworthiness in order to qualify them for the loan. Uniform Commercial Code establishes a unified and comprehensive method for regulation of security transactions in personal property, superseding the existing statutes on chattel mortgages, conditional sales, trust receipts, assignment of accounts receivable, and others in this field. Unilateral contract, a contract in which one party promises to do something if the other party performs a certain act, but the other party does not promise to perform it. The contract is formed only if the other party does perform the requested act. Universal agent, the agent who has complete authority over any activity of the principal, for example, power of attorney. Urea, formaldehyde foam insulation, UFFI, a type of foam in place insulation that releases formaldehyde gas. It was banned by the Consumer Public Safety Commission in 1982 from use in residences and schools. Holding that the risk had not been proven, a federal court lifted the ban in 1983. The local consumer and or environmental protection agency should be consulted for additional information on this type of insulation. Usury, on a loan claiming a rate of interest greater than that permitted by law. Utility, the ability to give satisfaction and or excite desire for possession. VA guaranteed loan, a loan made to qualified veterans for the purchase of real property wherein the Department of Veteran Affairs guarantees the lender payment of the mortgage. Valid, having force or binding force, legally sufficient and authorized by law. Value, present worth of future benefits arising out of ownership to typical users and investors. Variance, the authorization to improve or develop a particular property in a manner not authorized by zoning. Void, to have no force or effect, that which is unenforceable. Voidable, that which is capable of being adjudged void, but is not void unless action is taken to make it so. Voltage, electromotive force or potential difference expressed in volts. Voluntary alienation, transfer of title to an asset with the consent of the owner. Voluntary lien, any lien placed on property with consent of or as a result of the voluntary act of the owner. Warranty deed, a deed used to convey real property, which contains warranties of title and quiet possession, and the grantor thus agrees to defend the premises against the lawful claims of third persons. Wrap around mortgage, a form of secondary financing for the purchase of real property. The seller extends to the buyer a junior mortgage which wraps around the existing, in addition to any superior mortgages already secured by the property. Yard setbacks, a required open area along the property lines of a zoning lot, which must be unobstructed from the lowest level to the sky. Yard setbacks ensure light and air between buildings. Yield, the interest earned by an investor on an investment or by a bank on money it has loaned, also called return. Zoning, the separation or division of a city or town into districts, the regulation of buildings and structures in such districts in accordance with their construction and the nature and extent of their use, and the dedication of such districts to particular uses designated to serve the general welfare. Zoning district, a map residential, commercial, or manufacturing district with similar use, bulk, and density regulations. Zoning maps, maps that indicate the location and boundaries of zoning districts within a municipality. Zoning ordinance, a statement setting forth the type of use permitted under each zoning classification and specific requirements for compliance. This ends part 2 of South Carolina real estate glossary terms and their definitions. You guys use it, study, study, study. Place this on audio, repeat, and listen through your Bluetooth connection. I promise it'll help you. Until next time, stay blessed, guys. Out.